Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leaders Show, where each week we discuss key issues and news at the intersection of business, technology, and the humanities in hopes of making you a better digital leader. This week, we're discussing digitizing documents for the digital age with industry veteran and AI document management expert Bill Galusha, plus other headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. We're live each Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. The audio recording is available on major podcast platforms. And don't forget to check us out at DEInetwork.com for coaching, assistance, industry briefings, and peer-to-peer groups. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up Digital Enterprise Institute and our sister organization, the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. We're a professional association and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members worldwide, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. My co-host is Carlos Alvarenga. He's a researcher, an author, an educator at the University of Maryland in Georgetown, former advisor at EY and Accenture, and the father to a brand new book that's on pre-sale right now, Carlos, yes?
That's right. Special offer the next 2 days. Barnes & Noble was generous enough to offer, I think it's 25% off if you look up the rules of persuasion on bnn.com. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, well, I interviewed you a while back. It was actually the predecessor of this show on some of the topics you were covering. I think we're due to maybe do an episode on that, but it's a really interesting kind of intersection of ancient philosophy on persuasion, but updated for the business world, not just for sales and marketing people, which is a great audience for it, but just anybody who runs a business, a product. Has to do any internal selling, which is anybody who works at a large corporation.
Anybody who has a job, right?
Anybody who has a job, basically. You can't say that. That's not a target audience, Carlos, but you're right. That's basically what it is. So very good. Listen, I had a whole set of headlines to talk to you about, Carlos, for our call this morning. And then literally in the last hour, 20 other things popped into the news. It was a bizarre kind of morning, but a couple tidbits because they were, topics or things that we talked about on previous shows. So Chat GPT apparently can now interpret stock moves. Apple plans a health coaching service.
Right.
Coinbase is suing the SEC. Montana is banning TikTok statewide for everybody, not just government officials. And Bed Bath & Beyond filing for bankruptcy. And we'll talk about why that's tech related. But where do you want to start, buddy?
Well, we said before, right, that the battle royal is coming between Apple and Amazon in healthcare, and we saw it with One Medical, right, of which I'm a customer, new customer, and then the Apple Watch was sort of the first salvo. But I do really think that's the future battle for tech companies, and those are the two that are staking their early ground. The things that jumped out at me today, thinking about Bed Bath & Beyond, was this remarkable story about Tesla dropping its prices again, right? So there was a $5,000 drop this week across the range. 5,000 a month ago, and with the Plaid, like the most expensive car, there was a $20,000 drop in January. So at this point, the cars are let's say the car was $100,000 or 120, it's now down to 90. At the rate we're going, maybe they'll be free in a year. So the interesting question is the debate between people who think this is genius, right? Musk at his best, he's the new Henry Ford, or the other one are saying, didn't we just see Bed Bath & Beyond go nuts, right? Because it trained customers to expect discounts and they couldn't get them to buy it any other way. At this point, I think if you bought a Plaid S at full price, right, 4 months ago, you're pretty ticked off that the car is now, forget depreciation. The manufacturer is taking $30K off the top on you before depreciation even kicks in. So I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, we had yesterday the First Republic Bank thing come back on the radar screen, right? We all thought we were over that. And then suddenly they decide that there's another issue here. So I think the shares were down 40%. Market kind of went with it. So we'll see whether this stays kind of in the cage, right? Or we're going to have to reopen this contagion conversation again. So those things are kind of top of mind for me this morning.
Yeah, and the theme for me, and this is somewhat related to what we're going to talk to our guest about today, but these are organizations that just didn't transform, right? They just didn't embrace technology. And listen, I have some familiarity with Bed Bath and Beyond. Knew some of the people over there, and listen, you never root for a company to go under if you don't want people to lose jobs and things, but they're one of the organizations that I've alluded to in the past that just couldn't get out of their own way. We're stuck in the old way of doing things. Digital transformation was just not a priority for them. They thought things were going to be the same forever. And, at some point, we all stopped getting those 20% off coupons in the mail, right?
What's the idea of you can train customers, right? Which is kind of the macro story here, and to only behave in a certain way or to think of your company a certain way. And I think that seems to be kind of the general consensus, that people just decided that um, I'm only going to buy the coupons. And pre-pandemic, that was okay. Maybe that was okay because the coupon got you into the store, right? But post-pandemic, the stores, talking about this with my wife, she's look, the store was half empty. Then I'm only going to come in and buy the thing with the coupon, and that's it. So the original strategy was one of just, hey, it draws customers into the space. But in today's world, it just wasn't sustainable. And there was, like you said, there was no plan B. Like, or at least there was, it just didn't work.
Yeah, I know we were conditioned, like whenever we got that card, we would go, and then we stopped getting the card, so we stopped going. That was as simple as that, right?
Simple as that, right? Mhm.
We talked last week about the confusion and the threats of some of the crypto companies to go offshore, and then we got the organization that's probably the banner for this stuff is Coinbase. And Coinbase sues the SEC this week over lack of clarity on the regulation front.
Well, again, right, this is one of those things. This is an ongoing dialogue, and it happens with any innovation, right, in financial services, where there does take some time for regulators to kind of work out positions, right? And I think there's probably some crunching with Treasury involved in here as well, right? The broader Treasury. So, okay, that still isn't going to address the issue, right, of whether you're going to live in a regulatory regime or not. And that it's coming, it's pretty well understood. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't followed the story, so I'm not sure what it is that Coinbase is asking for or is upset about. But maybe it's just clarity around certain rules. They can decide whether they stay or go. Is that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, they're trying to figure out whether they're going to be. I'm just looking at the article here. Whether they're going to be kind of governed and regulated like any other
Wow.
institution, any other security. And apparently the SEC filed some paperwork, which typically is the predecessor to a lawsuit. So maybe they're just trying to get ahead of it. But apparently they asked for clarity. They put out a petition like a year ago and never heard back. And now they're
Well,
getting sued.
the answer is yes. it's
Yeah,
not.
exactly.
It's not going to. It's the only question now is how and where and in what way, right? But that this is going to be an unregulated money or currency. That age is over. We're done with sort of the first phase, I think, of the crypto kind of evolution.
The other interesting one before we get to the main topic today is the Wall Street Journal had some interesting reporting around, and we've talked a little bit about this, the layoffs in the tech industry, but hey, maybe it's more of a reshuffle. They're saying the unemployment rate for tech occupations is 2.2%. And so what they're tracking is, people migrating from, the big companies to, smaller, mid-size tech firms and startups, which is, I guess, good news, really interesting, for anybody who, is looking for maybe a career change and maybe with all this, advancement around AI and other things, maybe the timing is right to kind of spread out that talent.
Well, the challenge with tech, as we know, right, because we've been in this for a long time, is that it's like a treadmill. It's always sort of moving, right? And it's the macro unemployment rate is going to be low. The problem becomes any one particular skill set, right? And if you're not able to maintain relevance, then you simply kind of right fall off that treadmill, as whatever you used to know is no longer the thing, and something else like AI, right, enters the pipeline at the beginning, and then it lasts for some time, and then it kind of goes away, right? Some things have lasted a long time, but some things their lifespan is pretty short. And this is the challenge with just working in tech, is that it isn't like other careers where you reach a point, I think, where what you know is so permanently valuable to a certain extent. I think about law, for example, right? Somebody's been a corporate lawyer for a long time. At some point, the knowledge you have of how this works, it changes slowly enough that I would imagine you become partner, yeah, and that you keep learning, but your skill set isn't going to become obsolete, right, as a corporate attorney overnight. That's not the case in tech, right? You can go from a hot skill set, and I've seen it happen again and again, right, Dan, and 5 years later, nobody cares, right? Everybody's moving on to something else. And
Yep.
that's the exciting part, but it's also the challenge of working in technology for everybody.
Yep. So the main topic today is, part of digital transformation is this digitization thing. How do you get organizations digitized for this digital age that we're living in? And so I wanted to bring in an expert. So we'll bring in Bill Galusha. Bill's a longtime friend of ERPA AI and formerly the head of product marketing at Abby and KOFAX. So an automation and AI industry veteran. Bill, good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dan. Appreciate it.
So, Bill, go ahead and give everybody a little bit of your background and what you've been working on the last few years before we jump in.
Yeah, so my background is product marketing, product management for the last 25 years. Focused everything around automation. So and so that encompassed everything from business process management to robotic process automation, which was a big thing that has transformed over the last several years, to intelligent document processing. So really being able to just process data that comes in an unstructured format, and being able to turn that into structured data that can be better understood and fed into other systems. So I've ran a lot of the strategies around IDP the last 5 years, and certainly it's definitely changed, and it continues to evolve, as we can see.
So I think, Bill, people, at least as consumers, have this misconception that everything is digital at this point. The previous firms you've worked for have made an entire business out of this. So what sorts of things are still not digital, and why is it still this way?
Yeah, a lot is still not digital. I mean, you can think of documents, and these could be digital documents. It could be paper, right? If you're signing a document, a lot of what we do and how we interact with businesses, or as a constituent with government agencies, it involves documents. And when I explain to people what the technology does, people don't always understand the technology. So I think it's better to put it in the context of everyday, real world types of scenarios. So, I mean, if you're going to go open up an account, you're going to go transfer money between this wealth management company and this wealth management company, chances are there's going to be documents involved in terms of filling out specific information. Some of that might start digitally, but ultimately there might be some additional documentation that you have to provide. Customer onboarding is a good example, because I think, as consumers, most of what we do today, is we don't want to get in a car and drive to an office. We want to do it all online. So that's clearly how majority of people interact with businesses. But if you think in terms of, a lot of times there's documentation, who you work for, where you live, your identification. So these are kind of all the proof of documents. So, so when you're opening up a new account, someone might ask you, give me your last 2 pay stubs or something related to your past employer, so then we know how much money you make, or send us in a utility bill that proves that you actually live at this address. And, things like that are required in a lot of cases, whether it's opening up a new account, you're going into your local DMV to apply for a new real ID. So these are all proof of documentation that kind of trail a digital process that are typical. So that's pretty. These are just some common use cases, and filing a claim. There's documentation and documents that get generated. Filing your taxes, certainly we do that online, but if you think of business filing taxes, it's far more complex than personal filing taxes. So you have the K1 filing, which is a typical tax document, but you have all the trailing documents that are part of it. So all that information has to be digitized. So paper is always been this medium to moving data from people to systems, from systems back to people, and so forth. It's definitely declined, but a lot of what we're seeing is anytime you have a transactional type process, it may start digital, but at some point during that process, the consumer, the business user, the partner may have to submit documents as part of that overall business process.
But why? I guess my question, Bill, is why is it still like that? Right? Is it just that the platforms don't exist? That it used to be.
Yeah.
It was the intake of that data. Right now, you go to almost anywhere, and some restaurants even taking orders on tablets now instead of on paper. So is it just
Absolutely.
that the platforms haven't evolved, or the integrations aren't there? Like why?
The integration, yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of what you'll see is the integrations. Historically, if you go back 20 years, 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of when we were doing a lot of paper, we were mailing stuff into these big processing centers throughout the country. And those types of scenarios have really shrunk. There's still some of that happening today. But if you think in terms of all the use cases I see in the interactions, it's not because of what's being generated inside the business, but what's being generated outside the business is coming into the organization. You're seeing more ways to integrate systems, in particular external systems with internal systems, or taking internal systems and integrating it with legacy systems. So you're eliminating those gaps that exist. Which when you do that, you can keep all the data digital versus having to generate documents that ultimately then have to be redigitized, and the data has to be read from that document.
So Bill, what we're talking about before the show came on about there's the intake process right there. There's all the information that lives inside all these documents, and what is the state of the art these days in being able to look at all the information which is captured by a company. And I asked that because we've been talking about ChatGPT, and my view is that I think Amazon already said they're going to do is they'll be offering sort of ChatGPT kits to companies, and you make your own sort of version. Right? It works by ingesting information. So how far away are we from where we could say, okay, here is my version of ChatGPT. Go ahead and start reading everything that's ever been written in this company, right? Yeah. So I can begin to ask questions of our sort of collective past and present.
Yeah, if you think about it today in terms of how people are using ChatGPT and what the future holds, I think the creation of models that are based upon customers, the individual's business data, is really kind of where things are going to evolve to. I think you back to the point, you have all this data sitting in all these different systems. This still continues to be a real challenge for a lot of enterprises. You have modern systems, you have legacy systems, and that's why I think over the last several years you've seen automation kind of approach it in different ways, specifically around robotic process automation, where you're creating these digital bots that can interact with applications much like humans do. We thought, several years ago, we talked about these bots being very rudimentary in terms of what they do. You had to instruct them specifically what to do. But if you think of these digital bots and the evolution of ChatGPT and generative AI and how you can reach into a lot of different systems and pull information in, ultimately these, how we as business users or consumers interact with different systems and applications and how we generate ideas, content, answers to questions, I think is going to become exponentially easier over the next several years.
And I would imagine every tech brings its own risk. I'll give you an interesting example. My wife's a scientist, and we were talking about ChatGPT, and she was playing around on the system. And one thing she noticed was that ChatGPT made up citations. So
Yeah,
it was like it's it just was a completely fictional paper that it claimed was a
yeah.
source for a finding. And so it somewhere in its brain, right, it was inventing content,
Invented.
right?
Yes.
It didn't exist. And we can imagine somebody, right, in the corporate setting say, oh, we have a history of this customer or this thing that happened. And somehow, right,
Yes.
it's just a mishmash, right, of things that were true that get reconfigured into now a
Yeah.
record of something that.
Yeah, and that is the risk. I think that's the big, the big $1 million question is how do you put guardrails on the technology so that people are not, as you become more reliant on this technology, you begin to kind of assume that it's just giving you the right information, the right summarization. I've seen in many cases people, whether they're, wrote a story about it or, you know, asked a question and it gave, like to your point, came back with 5 novels that didn't even exist, right? There is that risk. Yeah, absolutely.
But Bill, I'm just relate this back to, for those watching who don't realize what IDP is, right? In the olden days, right, you're scanning this data in, and it's
Right.
kind of dumb data, or it's manually entered data. Maybe it goes into some kind of system. Now we have more intelligent systems that are interpreting what this data is and being able to adjust for changes and things like that. But isn't part of the benefit, if you think about the AI angle, of being able to, have a human there to say, hey, wait a second, you made a mistake. That's not what you thought it was. And then, it kind of learns, right?
Absolutely. I think you're going to still see a lot of, how these systems work. Even today, when you read, digitize a text on a document and you find the specific entities that you're looking for, say it's a contract, the buyer, the seller, the date, the amount, all that. At some point in the business process, you're going to have a human interact with that. They're going to make a decision. So if you now add in, ChatGPT and the ability to generate content out of that data from that document, it can provide a quick summary of what's in that document. But at some point, you're still going to have a human have to interact with that. But the benefit is the time to getting that summarization of that text in the document, including all the structured data that you're trying to pick out and getting it into your systems, whether that's a contract system or an AP system or a healthcare system. I think what you're going to see is a lot of the combination of the technologies coming together to kind of solve the problem in a little bit different way. I think what you're seeing today with vendors and how they're adopting ChatGPT is everyone's trying to check the box, so to say. Yeah, we built this integration. Now we have this widget that sits in our application, but I think over the next several years, you'll see a whole new wave of applications that are using AI technology in a much different way. Because you think of ChatGPT, we've all used it. A lot of people probably on this call tried it out, and it's very interactive, iterative, right? So it's not this like, if you think of the chatbots today, conversational AI, you go to a website, you ask it a question, it gives you an answer, right? Most chatbots, you can't kind of interact with it in the way that a human would interact with another human. And I think that's the beauty of the technology as it's evolved.
But there's an interesting element to it as a content producer, we look at it a little bit differently. And I'm thinking about my new book, right? So the book comes out, ChatGPT reads the book, learns everything that it took me 2 years to write, and then now it can give advice or sort of regurgitate or recap the thing that I created, right? Without giving me credit, without giving me kind of any recognition as the source of this. And on a personal level, I find that kind of distressing, right? Also, it's money
Right.
that I'm going to lose out as a creator of this content. And I tell you, it's a really interesting thing. When I was writing the book, one of the things that I learned was you cannot quote a song lyric, I mean, in any way, shape, or form without getting it cleared, right? And so And clearing song lyrics is one of the most arcane, like, like medieval level process you can ever imagine, because a song can be owned by 20 different people. And one part, the rights for the US are owned here, the rights for the UK are owned somewhere else, and everybody has to say okay. So you just wind up not quoting songs, you just paraphrase them instead of tell the story. But okay, so all of a sudden ChatGPT reads the Beatles catalog. They just announced that Freddie Mercury's estate is selling all of his lyrics, or and starts talking to you about this song says this and quoting this. It's all instantaneous, right? It's violated like 15 laws. So
Mhm.
the thing that fascinates me is sort of how are these systems going to operate if they can just take away someone's content and present it at its own, right? And or the stuff that I have copyright on, which you're supposed to pay me for and get my permissions for you to use, it just decides, well, I don't care, right? Is ChatGPT, in other words, like the first harbinger of a post-copyright world?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because if you've used ChatGPT and you type in a question or whatever, it spits you back a summarization of the answer, but you don't know necessarily what resources it's drawing on.
Right.
And to your point, I think as the technology evolves and gets implemented into how we search for content online, or how we generate content, there has to be, I think, some knowledge of where this information is coming from. Otherwise, it's was it human generated? Was it computer generated? If it was computer generated, what sources are we using? I think that's, to your point, is absolutely important, and I think that you're absolutely spot on in terms of the legal repercussions in terms of the content that could be generated. Is it factually accurate? Is it is there not things in there that are not accurate? What are the legal implications as well? So it's a whole new world.
Bill, I wanted to ask you, your previous couple roles, you were very involved in this kind of intelligent document space. It seems to me, and I can get your unbiased opinion about this now, because you don't have to speak for any particular firm.
Right.
It seems to me these intelligent document guys, vendors, have come out of the woodwork in the last 6 months. I mean, it seems like everybody is doing it, and there's I think a dozen or so new players in this space. Why do you think it's so hot right now? And does this new generative AI thing just eat their lunch and just kill it?
Yeah. So the technology's evolved. So I kind of attribute what has happened in intelligent document processing to kind of what happened with robotic process automation. RPA, going back several years ago, they were focused on automating digital tasks, moving data from system A to system B, creating Excel spreadsheets or whatever, reading data from Excel spreadsheet. But what all the RPA vendors recognized after a few years of doing that is we have all these documents. We have no way of taking this PDF and understanding what type of document is this. And once I've understood what type of document it is, how do I get the data out of the document? There's a lot of legacy systems that kind of filled that need, that gap early on, but everything has moved towards kind of a no-code, low-code approach to automation. So anyone who's on this call who's worked with technology and software, things just get inherently easier with every wave of the next generation of apps and technology. Things just get much easier, and so that's kind of what I spurred the whole wave of these document processing vendors, is that they could take technology that was generally relegated to a very small group of individuals within the company and say, how can I take machine learning, NLP, and all this other technology and be able to train models that can understand content and data relative to these documents right out of the box. And that's essentially what you've seen. And so this has created this, you say a dozen new vendors. I would say there's probably well over 50 vendors, and there's probably even more than that are focused on just processing documents.
And Bill, if I can ask, sorry to interrupt, just an ignorant question. What is kind of the big promise right? That when they go in to see a customer or CIO,
Yeah.
they go, look, this is the biggest before and after picture. In the past, you had this, and now
Yeah.
because you buy our software, you're going to have this wonderful thing. What is that wonderful thing?
Yeah, so it's focused on automation. So if you think of it in terms of a business process, if it's a digital process, everything just flows digitally from point A to point B to point C. With the minute you inject a document or an image that you've captured on a mobile device, it provides this roadblock to automation. It's interesting because the buyers of this technology are really often fixated on, accuracy, speed, performance, and the reality is that it's those are important, but it's really getting back to the heart of what's the problem you're trying to solve within the business, because there's a ton of interesting use cases for the technology, and with a lot of these vendors, they've kind of gravitated to the ones that we've always automated, finance, accounts payable, invoices. Shockingly, people are still doing paper invoices or taking PDFs out of an email. But, so there's a lot of vendors that are all competing for the kind of the scraps within that segment of the market. But, you look at banking, there's a lot of interesting use cases that are dealing with highly unstructured data. Financial documents that hold troves of information, right? So you think about it, yes, it's important to get that data out of those financial documents into a structured format. But what's really more interesting is what they're doing with that data. And we were talking about this earlier, is this, it's really the analytics, the understanding of the data and using that information to drive decisions. I mean, you just mentioned earlier ChatGPT and doing stock predictions and things like that. So you're starting to see how all this technology can come together to kind of really advanced automation beyond where we are today.
We were talking, Bill, last week that what we're seeing in the ERPA AI network is really a push towards industry-specific solutions and more outcome-centric vendors and business models. I'm wondering if there's any beyond the traditional things, the back office finance things. I'm wondering if there's certain industries or areas that you see as big opportunities, because really the domain expertise is where I think the exciting stuff is. If you can take a document and create sort of triggers to say, okay, not only do I know what that is, but based on that information, I want to execute a sales process or revenue opportunity or any other process based on that data in real time, instead of just uploading it or scanning it into a system, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the vendors that will, at least I've seen, having greater success are the ones that have picked a specific industry in certain parts of the business. Banking is a good example. There's a few vendors that are really focused in that area because it does require a lot of domain expertise. It isn't just simply processing a document, getting the data off. You have to understand, how is the customer going to use that data? It's back to my point, because that's really a big part of the value proposition that you're presenting. So I think the focus in the types of industries that I'm seeing is certainly in banking, insurance, healthcare. Healthcare, I think, is here in the U.S. has a huge potential for not just the technology around document processing, but also what we're seeing around AI and ChatGPT. I think that presents a wave of opportunities, because a lot of the data that you're dealing with within healthcare is very specialized, right? So it's related to the services around healthcare and medical and all that. But it's a lot of times it's highly unstructured, so very complex. A lot of it's handwritten text. That is an area when we talk about document processing. It's not just the machine printed generated text, but it also is the handwritten text that physicians or other nurse practitioners or other people are filling out on documents as well.
Also, I think that's interesting. This where you still have this kind of intersection between the document and digital world. And I lived through this just
Mhm.
a couple weeks ago because I got a new prescription. And Dan, we've talked about how much I like Warby Parker, the company, right? I think they're fantastic. But this is one of the first time where I had an issue with them because I just wanted to update the prescription on Warby Parker, and there was no way of doing that. I mean, there
Yeah,
wasn't any like upload the PDF. I mean, I have it in PDF form, so it's at that, right? But
yeah,
at least there was no way. I tried to use the chatbot, right? But there was something as simple as the prescription needs to be updated. And I was getting ready to buy a pair of glasses, but the whole transaction just sort of stopped because it's just one thing, which is I just need you to tell you that their prescription, and it's a microscopic, I mean, very small.
yes. So you think about it, and that's the example. That's a great example of where you have the intersection of, oh, we just need this piece of this document, this piece of data,
Right.
and it's like, oh,
Every,
it kind of
everything's
it breaks right there. And
right.
to the consumer, to people who really care less about what the technology is you're using in the background, it's just like, I just want to upload this and submit it and confirm that this is the correct piece of information, right?
Right.
And you see a ton of that. It could be in healthcare, it could be in banking, it could be insurance, government, dealing with government agencies as a constituent. Absolutely. So I think, I think the wave of the technology, not just around processing data from documents, but the chat GPT in terms of how we interact with these applications is just primed to change over the next several
And I think
years.
the other thing too is I'm a amateur sort of student of white collar crime, having for a long time, and I think that's my career started in like auditing, such
Mhm.
consulting firm, right? And one of the things I read about was just the how audit treats things that seem to be off, right? So by sort of by principle, the assumption is that if somebody has a wrong entry, right? Let's say you record a wrong revenue or a sale number. The default is that it was a mistake. It doesn't assume that it's fraud, right?
Fraud,
Now,
right?
if you see this over and over again, that sort of changes, but that usually isn't kind of the case. They're sort of seen in isolation. So if I see, right, 5 incorrect entries, but I don't connect the dots, because the default is it's just a mistake that needs to be corrected, I give this a pass, right? But if you're able to see, wait a minute, this is happening here, 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 then the
Mhm.
perception changes to that we may have accounting fraud, right, at this
Yeah.
firm. And I think one of the really interesting things, likewise, there's been research done on risk statements. So there was a fascinating paper that came, I think it was from Chicago a couple of years ago, where they looked at the risk discussions in 10K filings. And what they
Mm.
found was that whenever certain words appear in those risk discussions, the firm is more likely to have a risk event in the next 12 months, right? And they built an NLP engine that began to read the risk discussions, and they said our accuracy is actually surprisingly good. That we can tell you, right? This is almost like an automated short machine, right? If this thing gives you a score above this level, right, it's time to go short because they're likely to have a kind of a disclosure event kind of in the future. So I think that's the other part that I find interesting. That right now there's all kinds of stuff hiding in sort of the document world, right? Filing, audit reports that goes unseen, unread, ununderstood. And
Yeah.
along comes ChatGPT, we got a whole new from a
Well, it's interesting because I think, back to the whole, fraud or someone, a vendor overcharging you. If you're processing an invoice, right, you're just reading the data and you're some AP person is, and then, approving that payment for that invoice. But, what about if you're a big enterprise, you have lots of contracts that, at some point were approved, and within those contracts, you have set pricing based upon, the goods, the services, the quantity, the amounts that you're buying. And I guarantee you, and I've seen this in enterprises, is that they don't do a lot of checking, right? So those are the kind of, to your point, data, when you aren't kind of extracting the data from these documents and putting it into an accessible format you're likely losing out on opportunity where, in the case I just gave, is someone's committing, sending you in an invoice that is not what you should be paying, and you're overpaying. So,
Bill, any final advice for anybody watching around just best practices around implementing intelligent document AI types of solutions, common challenges implementing these technologies?
Yeah, I think, and back to your earlier question, you mentioned where does ChatGPT affect some of these vendors, as given there's so many that are doing. I think it does over time. They complement. So if you think in terms of what I've seen a lot with the document processing vendors, a few of them have generated integrations with ChatGPT to use the summarization capability of ChatGPT, and that's really helpful because not only you're extracting data from a document, but then you're also providing a summarization of it. So it could be a healthcare document, it could be a contract. But I think over time, the technologies are kind of morphed together into one platform. I do think that over the long haul, intelligent automation. So there's automation vendors that do more than just the ingestion of data from unstructured documents, but they also do the integration. They also do the full end-to-end business process with human interactions. You're going to see, I think, a few vendors kind of bubble up to the top that provide kind of that full end-to-end suite of technology and solutions. So that's why I think companies like Microsoft are pretty well positioned. You look at their investment in the ChatGPT. I mean, that technology could live in any of the Microsoft applications.
Right.
And this is back to my point. You think about how we interact with Excel, Word. Give it a year or two, and it's going to be very different in terms of the types of things that we can do. I mean, just Excel. Just the ability to ask it, give me a summary of all my customers in North America. Okay, now segment that summary down to. I mean, how we do that today is more programmatic versus ChatGPT, and how it generates the responses and the summarization of content is more of an interactive process. So I think from you think of that technology, it's the human interaction, productivity, how they get their job done, and then more of at an enterprise, more of a structured business process. Enterprises have a lot of structure around their business processes, and how you can inject that technology into it will change as well over time.
Bring back Clippy, the smart paperclip, Microsoft.
The smart paperclip. So this is the thing. It always goes to these waves. It's like it's like we're getting ready for the next big wave of AI apps and you'll say, yeah, Clippy. I remember Clippy. This time around, Clippy's going to be a little smarter.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Bill Galusha, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great to have you.
Carlos, any final thoughts?
Well, this is a remarkable topic to me. It seems kind of this very technological thing, but maybe because I'm a writer and I care about words, right? Whenever we talk about documents and printing and the relationship that we have with the written word in whatever form, I find it very interesting. And I think it is interesting to think about, are we right at the cusp of an age where documents become dynamic things, right? That's kind of how I see it. There was a short story a while back about a book that changed every time you open it. So it was a story, right? So you open this book, and when the one time you open it, the character, the hero lives, and then you close it and you open again, hero doesn't live, right? And so this idea of, hey, we're the age of the page, the printed page is a static thing, is kind of drawing to a close, right? I find that really, really interesting. So things to watch as we go forward in this new world, right, Dan?
Interesting. All right. Are you going to go out and buy a cheap Tesla? this week?
I'm not, I'm not a fan of the product, as they say.
No, I'm just teasing you.
So,
You're a staunch critic of all things Elon Musk. Listen, Elon is not getting his blue check revenue that he was counting on.
are
He's
you?
going to sell
Is
more
there,
Teslas.
I just need to know: are you blue checked, Dan, without your
I'm
permission?
not. But I never was in the first place, so I didn't
Now,
have to make that decision.
complaining, people said, "Hey, I didn't ask to be blue checked,"
I
and
saw that.
because the people weren't buying it, so I think to kind of give the impression that there were celebrities who got the blue check. I'm like, wait a minute, you're making.
I saw a whole list of people. I did not pay for this blue check.
Not pay for this blue check, so
Now people want to get rid of the blue check.
right, exactly. Yeah, the red check, right? The super
Exactly.
super
Very
platinum,
funny.
right? Check.
Good conversation, Carlos. And for all you watching, we're planning on launching a few client user groups and local chapters in the coming months. So if you'd like to get involved, DM me or message us on DEInetwork.com. We've also got coaching and advice available on a variety of topics. So if we can help with anything, please let us know. Check out Carlos's book. It's worth a read. And as always, we'll be back Wednesday live, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Carlos, have a great week.
You too. Thanks everyone for watching. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.